you know, Canada, England, Sweden, that's where polio first hit. Not in India and or Africa or South America. Why would healthy children come down with this? Well, that's where they were using pesticides.
Right.
Polio is now being seen in places like Nigeria, for example, which is heavily polluted. A lot of petrochemical industries are there. And polio started to disappear as soon as they changed the laws regarding toxicity. It was never proven to be caused by a virus. The virus was never isolated. And if you look, and I've spoken to scientists who deal in this field, and other people have researched it, and they will categorically say, we never isolated the polio virus. It was never proven that polio virus caused polio.
Well, the thing a lot of people miss too is that the polio actually started disappearing in other countries that didn't use the polio vaccine.
Absolutely.
But yet, you know, the polio vaccine in the U.S. was taking the credit for getting rid of it.
Yeah, Robert Mendelsohn, the famous pediatrician, has that quote. He says, if the polio vaccine got rid of polio, how come it disappeared in other places where it was barely used?
Right, and people forget that, or just put it under the carpet.
Well, when we have facts that don't jive with our cultural belief system, we either change our cultural belief system, which is very painful and difficult, or we ignore the facts.
Now, what about when someone does get vaccinations? Can this be something where it kind of it becomes insidious in our body, and so the damaging effects won't happen for years and years?
Well, it's interesting because no one has ever done long-term studies on vaccinated kids. How long do they look if for a child? How long do they look after a child's been vaccinated to see if the vaccine causes damage? And I ask this at my seminars, and they'll say, well, a year or two, or 6 months, or 10 years, or whatever. Well, if you look at the hepatitis B vaccine insert from Merck, they watched the children after they were given the shots for 4 days. The longest was I think one of the measles vaccines for 2 weeks. The fact is, we don't so even though neurological and autoimmune conditions and cancer and other conditions may take months or years to develop, we just, and by that time, 3 years go by, and the child has this horrible condition that develops. So we don't know where it's coming from. It's just bad luck. It's bad genes. So doctors tell parents. By that time, the kid might have been injected with 50 or 60 or 70 shots. In fact, the average 6-month-old child in America today, by the time they're 6 months old, if they followed the regimen they're given, should be given 45 shots or 45 vaccines.
That's
45
crazy.
by 6 months of age. And that's the worse than any other country in the world. One scientist was discussing this with people it was a study done in Scotland and Ireland, and whenever he would travel and tell the doctors there what the American vaccine schedule was, they all thought he was joking. They did not believe. They said, you can't be, you have to be making this up. No one would inject a child with a developing immune system, an immature immune system, with that many shots. There's a few vaccine advocates that are very out there. And for a number of years, they've been promoting this test, or this dare. And they've been going to the vaccine manufacturers, to the medical doctors and researchers pushing vaccines and saying, we will give you $100,000 certified check if you will take all the shots a child should be given.
Right.
Not one has agreed to do it. They all say, I'm sorry, no, no, no. Because you can give them to the little kids because they can't verbalize what's going on. So who gets the most vaccines and drugs in this country? The very old and the very young, the two most helpless.
Now talk to us about, again, this might be a little bit off topic, but I know this is important, I think, for people watching, that the U.S. government actually has come up with something called the National Vaccine Injury Act, for parents who have kids that
well, there's a vaccine adverse event reporting system where they're supposed to report the shots, which they don't. Oh, let me mention that, because you had asked about it, and I sort of got off the topic. The benefits versus the risks. Well, in order to know the benefits versus the risks, you have to know what the risks are. If we vaccinate 1,000 kids, how many get hurt? Then we know the benefits versus the risks. Well, nobody knows. Nobody knows what the chances are of your child being hurt by a vaccine, for a very good reason. Nobody's reporting it. One study from the FDA showed that only 1 in 10 adverse reactions is ever reported. So for 10 kids that are hurt, only 1 is reported. Well, that's a government study, so you have to question it. A study done by Conagud Laboratories that makes vaccines, or made it then, found that only 1 in 50 adverse reactions is reported. So for 50 kids that are damaged, only 1 is ever reported to the authorities. So, and there was another study on the rotavirus, which eventually was pulled from the market, that
Right.
found that only 1 in 500 vaccine reactions was ever admitted.
It's
So how do
incredible.
we know how many kids are being hurt?
Right.
If you don't know, if they're not reporting the injury, you can't do a risk-benefit, or as I sometimes call it, a cost-benefit analysis. It's impossible.
Right.
So how could an MD say it's safe to give the shot if they don't report the damage, so they don't know how many kids are being hurt, they don't know if it's safe?
Right.
If 1 in 2 kids is being hurt by the shot, maybe parents should know this.
Absolutely.
And if it's not, let parents know that too. But at
Right.
least let's do the research, and the government is not doing the research.
It's incredible.
It,
Now-
it is incredible, and it was like eating potato chips when I started studying vaccine material. The more I started, the more I had to keep doing it. I was shocked. I was blown away by this whole thing. I'm still shocked today. I'm still shocked that in America, so few people are permitted. That's why this show is great.
Right.
There's so little, so small forum that people can talk about the other side.
Right.
Reporters, they'll take a vaccine story about how vaccines are great. They won't question it. They won't go to a scientific expert and say, can you please tell us, is this a good story? Is this valid? Is this good science? You know, every week on Newsweek and Time and New York Times and Wall Street Journal and newspapers, we have a medical breakthrough.
Right.
Every week we have a medical breakthrough. It's great, the newest thing. Every week cancer is going to be cured. If you look at various magazines, every week there's a new... What happened? Cancer is worse than ever.
Yep.
Why hasn't it been cured? We've had 42 cures already this past month.
Exactly.
Well, what happened was that they didn't work, and it didn't make the front page when they were pulled from the market.
Right.
And unfortunately, we are not being told a balanced story. I wish the media would have objective scientists working for them, so when the National Cancer Institute or some pharmaceutical company says this drug or this vaccine is safe and effective, the person could look in the literature, go through it, and say, is the article valid? I subscribe to medical journals, and people say, why do you do that? And I often say, for the laughs. Because you read this paper 1 month or 1 week, the journal will come out, like the Journal of the AMA or the New England Journal of Medicine or any of the others, and you'll see this article about how great this drug is.
Right.
And, okay, fine, here's the study. And a week or 2 or 3 later, there'll be the letters to the editor, and they'll shred it. They'll tear it apart. It'll be the worst study ever done, and they'll practically threaten the authors with dishonesty and fraud. But that didn't make the headlines 3 weeks earlier.
Right.
So when the rebuttal comes, nothing is said. And the papers, the media, really should be aware of this, that what we call science is really a world of hot controversy and major differences of opinion.